Susie was a woman who had Down syndrome, and she came to live with us back in the mid 90s. And she became a part of our family and was with us until the day she passed, just a little over 10 years ago. Now, you could call her Susie, but she would introduce herself to you as Queen Sykes, Sykes being her last name. Now, she wasn't doing that as a joke. She wasn't doing that to see if you'd get a chuckle. She considered herself to be a queen, and you damn well better recognize. And that, yeah, there might be a lot of women out there who see themselves as uh, royalty, as a princess, perhaps even a queen, but Susie lived it. And you better make it part of your reality too. Now, Susie and I were best of buds like from day one, and we're constantly at each other. I'd come in the door, and her room was just to the right as you came in the front door of our house. And as soon as I came in, I would hear from her room, "What are you doing, bowling ball head?" And I would say something equally intelligent, like, "You haven't had your ass beating in like 2 or 3 days. I think it's time." And then she would go, "Oh yeah, come on, kung fu time." And kung fu time was this movement where you would bring the right foot up and down, heading towards you, and go like this. Ha! I don't know why the karate chop hand had to be right a part of the forehead like this. Made it look like it had a beak, but that was kung fu time. The problem with that was Susie and I would talk shit to each other endlessly, and I would threaten her and she would threaten me. And sometimes I would do that. And as I said, her room was right there as you came in the front door. And more than once, I would come in, we would start jawing with each other, not realizing that just down the hall and to the right in the dining room, my wife was having a meeting with all of Susie's staff, like once a month or so, because she was actually a ward of the state. Her representatives would be in there making sure everything was going well, while Susie and I were threatening to do each other grievous bodily harm. And my poor wife would be out there explaining, "No, they're just kidding. They're like, nobody's really getting punched with brass knuckles like they just said they were going to do." One time, Susie and I were sitting out there as part of one of these meetings, with people from the state and everything. And Sue and I were sitting right next to each other. She always sat next to me. And one of the representatives was talking about something, saying something about, well, people with Down syndrome, this, that, or the other. And when this woman said it, I looked at Sue and I said, "Sue, you got Down syndrome?" Without missing a beat, she looks at me and she goes, "No, me not. You do." And she'd beaten me. I mean, what do you say? What do you say at that point? No, you do. I said it first. And the worst part about it was all these representatives from the state and everything, they're all doing like this. They're like holding in their laughter, and that was pissing me off. The fact that they were holding it in was making me angrier than anything else, because I knew I just gotten obliterated. I just gotten destroyed. Don't pretend like it didn't happen, and that's what they were doing. They're like, "Oh, we're not going to laugh out loud and let him know that we know he got he got wrecked. Just laugh. Just go ahead and laugh. Don't be holding it to yourself." I'm used to it. Susie used to get the better part of me all the time. She'd win on the regular. He's sitting there with him. Oh, that poor bald man. Now, one of my favorite Susie moments of all time was Susie had gotten in trouble at work at her day program for something. Typically, it was the same stuff. Susie was limited on how much candy she could have and stuff, and like me, she loved her candy. So if somebody, a staff member left their purse around or something, and Susie could find $1 in there, it was going to be hers, so she could go to the candy machine and get some chocolate. And even more often, she'd find new staff and stuff, and she could play it. She would go to a new staff member who didn't know her story, and she would give them this big sob story about how, I don't know what she'd tell them, that she hadn't eaten in weeks, and she was probably telling stories about getting beatings at home or something, and she would just love nothing better in the world than just to have one last candy bar. She'd find a way to get them to give her money, and then of course it'd get found out and she would get in trouble. So this was like a Tuesday or Wednesday, and every Friday they had a dance at her work. It was part of the program there, and she loved the dance. Well, she'd gotten in trouble, so her punishment was she couldn't go to the dance that Friday. Now me, I'm obviously very mature, so I took this opportunity to really get her good. She had a boyfriend named John. I'm not sure John knew he was her boyfriend, but I think he had an inkling maybe. But anyway, she was in love with John. And so Susie also had an arch nemesis named Chrissy. When I say arch nemesis, I mean these two little women who neither one of them was close to 5 foot tall, not even in the ballpark, really had at each other. Not friends at all. I mean, Hatfields and McCoys had nothing on them. And so I decided, since Susie couldn't go to the dance, that I would tell her that I was hearing rumors that John was going to be smooching on Chrissy at the dance because she wasn't going to be able to be there. And it got the response I wanted. Susie was like, "No, him not." I said, "I'm just telling you what I heard, Sue. And John really likes Chrissy, and Chrissy really likes John. And of course, you're in trouble. You can't go to the dance, so it's there's no telling what's going to happen there." And she would be fuming, and I would be proud of myself because, again, the whole maturity thing. So this was, again, I think on a Tuesday. I come home from work on Thursday, and I got out of work before Susie, and I come in the front door, and I look, and she's in her room, and I'm like, why is she in her room? And instead of throwing out a bowling ball head at me or something like that, she was just sitting there on her bed. She wasn't even watching her shows. She loved her shows, like Dallas, anything from the 80s. She was just sitting there with the mean bitch face on. So walking out the kitchen, I said to my wife, I said, "Why is Susie here?" And she says she got suspended. I was like, wow, she stepped it up a notch. She must be doing a little more pilfering. I said, "What did she do?" She goes, "For some unknown reason, she got on the bus this morning and she smacked Chrissy." And I had to immediately think quickly, because I wasn't going to get in trouble too. I had to think quickly and pretend like I had no idea why that happened. I was like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me! Oh, do you want me to talk to her?" And my wife, because I was always the last line of discipline there, and my wife goes, "Yeah, you got to have words with her." I said, "Yeah, I can't imagine what would possess her to just go in and hit Chrissy." So I threw Sue under the bus. I would have gotten in big trouble with my wife if she knew that I was antagonizing Sue, and that's why she jacked her up. And again, before you get concerned, the strikes from Susie or Chrissy weren't going to do any damage to anybody. They weren't anything lethal. But so Sue got busted for that. And I got off scot-free. And I will tell you this, though. I went in and I did have to talk to her. And I, just between her and I did apologize to her. I tried to set her mind at ease. I said, "Listen, Sue," I said, I was just kidding you about John. John doesn't like Chrissy. Nobody likes Chrissy. I jumped on and everything. And that evening, when my wife wasn't looking, I smuggled Susie in a little not extra, I smuggled her in a little chocolate pudding cup because I felt kind of bad for getting her in trouble. Not bad enough to admit that I had done something wrong, mind you, but I felt kind of bad. And then I want to show you this one last picture because Sue loved coming to my wrestling matches. It was like her thing, and I loved having her here. And it's one of my favorite pictures because I had just gotten through with my match, and as I was coming back, I came over to her. She would always be front row because they would get there early. They would have a bus go down with a bunch of the other folks, and they would get there early. And I came over to give her a hug. If you look in the foreground of this picture, somebody's standing there waiting to horn in on the whole thing. That's Chrissy. Purely coincidental that this picture happened to be taken right at that moment. Well, coincidental, and the fact was Chrissy would always try and get in on anything Susie was doing. So she knew that Sue and I had this connection, so Chrissy would do anything she could to try and horn in on it. And I look back at that picture, and it's one of my favorites, and it makes me think of Sue. But it also makes me think that I'm pretty sure having Chrissy lurking right there as Sue and I were sharing a little hug, I'm pretty sure that night when they left that show, in the back of the bus, the shows didn't get over till like 10 o'clock, covered by darkness, I'm thinking there's a really good chance old Chrissy caught a tiny little hand to the back of the head. And I'm okay with that.